I remember the dry crackle of sun-scorched earth beneath my boots, the sound of struggle, of failed harvests, and of quiet prayers whispered to an indifferent sky. My name is Arman Riaz, and if you'd asked anyone in my village who I was back, then they'd probably just say, he's the farmer's son who never left. They wouldn't be wrong. I hadn't. But it wasn't for lack of dreaming. I was 26, living on the same land my father and grandfather had farmed before me. The soil had once been fertile, a gift passed down through bloodlines. But times had changed. Seasons grew unpredictable. Fertilizer prices soared. And when my father died of a stroke during the monsoon that flooded half our fields, the burden of generations fell on my shoulders like a sack of wet grain. I wanted to run, I'll admit that. There were nights I'd lie under the stars pretending. They were city lights, and I was far away, starting over, maybe even studying business or finance like I'd dreamed before life pulled me back home. But dreams are a luxury when debt collectors knock louder than ambition. I lived simply. Woke. Before dawn, milked the 2 cows we had left, worked the land till sundown, and helped my mother manage what little produce we could sell at the weekly town market. Every rupee we earned felt borrowed against hope. But fate, I've learned, has a strange sense of timing. It was a Saturday, late spring. The sun was still climbing when I noticed the dust trail on the main road near the mango trees. A sleek silver car rolled to a stop, hood steaming like a tea kettle. That wasn't a sight you saw often in our part of the world. Curiosity tugged at me. I wiped my hands on my shirt and jogged over. She stepped out of the car, city clothes, dark sunglasses, and confusion written all over her face. Her hair was tied back, neat but damp with sweat. I could tell she wasn't used to this kind of heat, or these kinds of breakdowns. "Need help?" I asked cautiously. She looked startled for a moment, then smiled politely. "Yes, please. The engine just died. I don't know much about cars." "Pop the hood," I said, already glancing around for tools. "Let me take a look," as I worked. She watched me quietly. I could feel her eyes scanning the grime on my hands, the patched-up shirt, the worn-out boots. I was used to it. Judgment. But her voice was softer when she finally spoke again. "You're good at this," she said. "Not really. Just grew up fixing things no one else would." A small laugh escaped her lips. "I'm Ava." "Arman," I replied. The car wasn't too bad, just a blown fuse, and I happened to have a spare from my old tractor. 20 minutes later, the engine hummed to life. "You're a lifesaver," she said genuinely. "I was supposed to be at a property site by noon." "Real estate?" I guessed. Not exactly. "My family develops resorts. I'm here to scout a new location." "Here?" I raised an eyebrow. Not much to see but dust and disappointment. She smiled, but there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes now. "You might be surprised." Before she left, she asked if I had a number in case she got lost again. I gave her the old Nokia I kept for emergencies, never thinking she'd actually call. But she did. A week later, I got a message. "Still owe you a lunch. I'm back in town." I stood staring at that text for a full 5 minutes like it was written in another language. No one ever came back to our village, not without a reason. We met at a small roadside dhaba. She wore jeans and a simple kurta this time, blending in more. And for some reason she asked more questions about me than about the car. I told her about my father. The land, the debt, the rain that never came, the yields that kept shrinking. "You ever think about doing something else?" she asked gently. "All the time," I confessed. "But it feels like betrayal, leaving this place. It's all I've ever known." She didn't say much, but I noticed how she scribbled in a small notebook she carried. It was our 3rd meeting when she said it. I talked to my father. He owns Serenity Holdings. You probably haven't heard of it. But we're considering turning some parts of this region into eco-retreats. Organic farms, heritage tours, that kind of thing. You know this land. Maybe you could help? I nearly laughed. Me? Work for your father? No, she said. Work with me. It sounded absurd. A farmer from a dying village advising a multi-million-dollar company? But she wasn't joking. And something about her tone, equal parts calm and challenge, made me pause. I went home that day, mind spinning. That night, under the stars, I didn't imagine escaping. I imagined building something that might bring others home too. That was the beginning. I never imagined one act of kindness could tilt the axis of my world. Fixing that car on a dusty morning felt like routine, something I would have done for any traveler in need. But Ava wasn't just any traveler. She was a turning point wrapped in city charm and quiet curiosity. After she left, I expected things to return to normal. The same sun, the same cracked fields, the same quiet ache in my chest. But a week later, my old Nokia buzzed with a message that lit something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Still owe you a lunch, back in town. I stared at it, reread it, thought it might be a mistake. But the next afternoon, I found myself nervously wiping dust from my only decent shirt and cycling toward the small dabba near the river road. She was already there, wearing a loose kurta, sunglasses on the table, sipping lemon soda like she belonged in this world. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said, smiling. I wasn't sure you were serious, I replied. We talked about small things at first, mango season, village weddings, traffic in Lahore, but slowly her questions dug deeper. What keeps you here? What would you do if money wasn't a problem? And the one that made me pause. Do you believe in second chances? I told her I wasn't sure, that dreams feel heavier when they're dragged through mud and unpaid loans, that I once wanted to study agricultural business and maybe even develop new ways to revive dying farms. But life had other plans. She listened, not with pity, but with interest, like she was assembling a puzzle and I was a missing piece. Then came the proposal. My father's company, she said one evening as we sat on the edge of a dried canal, is planning to develop an eco-resort project in this region. Not the usual concrete monstrosity. We want something sustainable, rooted in the local environment and culture. But we need someone who knows this land. And you thought of me? I asked, unable to mask my skepticism. You're the only one who sees it like it's still alive. I didn't know what to say. I'd never been offered anything like this. They weren't offering charity. They were offering trust, a role, a voice, something I hadn't felt in years. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I was introduced to her father, Mr. Adil Mirza. Stern, sharp, not easily impressed. He grilled me on everything: soil types, crop cycles, water tables, community concerns. I answered each with the conviction only experience can teach. I expected rejection. But instead I got a contract, not a job, a partnership. They wanted me to co-develop the model farm section of the eco-resort, a living, working organic farm that guests could learn from, participate in, and that could also employ local farmers year-round. The night I signed that contract, I sat under the stars and wept. Not from fear, but from release. Like a door I had forgotten existed had suddenly opened. That was the start of my transformation. The first phase was planning, and that meant learning. I knew farming. I knew people. But I didn't know spreadsheets, zoning laws, or profit margins. So I traveled to the city for the first time in years. Ava arranged for me to stay in a modest guest house, and every day for a month, I attended meetings, workshops, and site reviews. I sat beside architects, designers, ecologists. Most of them wore suits and carried tablets. I showed up with handwritten notes and calloused fingers. But I earned their respect, not with titles, but with insights no textbook could offer. Those trees won't survive the wind from the west, I'd point out. Guests won't walk 100 meters to see chickens. They'll want to interact within 10. Change the irrigation layout, and you'll cut water waste by 30%. By the third week, even the senior consultants started nodding before I finished sentences. But learning the city wasn't just about work. I learned to use email, to wear something other than boots, to walk into a room and not shrink from the stares. Ava was always close, never leading me, never pushing, but quietly encouraging. Her father remained distant, but I could sense his walls slowly lowering. Back home, whispers started spreading. He's selling the land. He's forgotten where he came from. He's being used. But I kept going, not to prove them wrong, but because for once, I believed in where I was going. Construction began 3 months later. I insisted we hire only local laborers. Trained some of them myself. We used sustainable wood, solar panels, and dug fresh water wells that helped the entire village. The farm came alive first. We started with seasonal vegetables, herbs, and a chicken coop. I brought in a bee expert to start an apiary. Kids from the village would come by after school to watch, to ask questions. We created walking paths, a small observation deck, meditation, corners shaded by neem trees. What had once been barren land began to bloom, not just with crops, but with possibility. The resort buildings followed, low-impact villas, a central learning center, a farm-to-table cafe. Every part of it reflected the balance we were trying to strike, between tradition and innovation, between preservation and progress. A year passed in a blur. When the grand opening arrived, I stood in front of journalists, local politicians, and even international investors, wearing a tailored kurta and holding a microphone I never thought I'd touch. I told them about the land, about my father, about the weight of staying when everyone else left. I told them that success wasn't about leaving behind where you came from. It was about lifting it with you. When I finished, Ava was the first to clap. Her father stood next to her, and for the first time, he smiled at me, not as a partner, but as a son he never had. Today, that land is no longer just a farm, it's an ecosystem. We host workshops, retreats, training programs. Local youth now learn business through agriculture. Former laborers have become managers. Women run our seed bank project. Our honey brand was picked up by an international grocery chain. And me? I own a majority share in the farm resort venture. I speak at conferences across Asia on sustainable development. I mentor others, farmers who've lost faith, youth who don't want to leave their roots. But most importantly, I'm still grounded. I still wake before dawn. I still walk the fields barefoot. I still touch the soil. Because no matter how high you rise, you're only as strong as what you're rooted in. And for me, that root was always struggle. And that struggle? It became my foundation. The day the first guest stepped foot onto our farm, I stood by the gate with hands trembling, not from fear, but from pride. It was a family from Islamabad, city folk, comfortable shoes, camera-ready smiles, and the wide-eyed wonder I'd only seen in tourists traveling abroad. But now, they were here, on my land, walking through our fields like it was something sacred. And to me, it was. We had transformed dust into gold, not by digging for treasure, but by cultivating meaning. The farm wasn't just an attraction, it was an experience. The guests harvested their own food, fed the animals, learned about crop cycles, and ended their day eating meals grown just meters away from the kitchen. The satisfaction on their faces was beyond anything money could buy. Within 3 months, Serenity Eco Farms was fully booked for the next 6. Reviews poured in. Influencers, travel bloggers, environmentalists, they all started talking. Word spread beyond borders. What was once dismissed as a dead village became a destination. And I, a nameless farmer, became a name whispered in boardrooms and business podcasts. I received my first invitation to speak internationally at a sustainability conference in Singapore. I remember standing on that stage, spotlight in my eyes, blazer too tight, heart thudding like a war drum. I told them my story, of broken tractors and dried wells, of a girl with car trouble, of second chances dressed as coincidences. I didn't use slides. I didn't use buzzwords. I used truth. And truth, I discovered, is a universal language. By the time I returned home, 3 new investors had reached out. But I wasn't interested in selling out. I didn't want to franchise. I wanted to scale purposefully. Every move had to mean something. So we expanded slowly. First, we built a second site near Hunza. Cooler climate, different crops, breathtaking views. Then one in Sindh, hot, but ideal for date palms and heritage revival projects. Each location was managed by locals trained at our original farm. Every new branch carried the same DNA: sustainability, empowerment, and rooted dignity. But success brought its own set of storms. With visibility came vultures. Competitors tried to copy the model. A multinational offered to buy us out for more money than I could imagine. Government officials began sniffing around, expecting favors in exchange for permits. Then came the smear campaigns. News headlines questioning my qualifications. Whisper campaigns about how a village farmer could never have done this without connections. Even Ava's involvement was twisted into gossip. It's not talent, some said. It's romance. They couldn't see past their cynicism. The truth was simpler and harder. We were winning because we cared more, worked harder, listened deeper, and didn't build on concrete. We built on community. But the pressure mounted. I barely slept. The weight of expectations, expansion, and media attention pulled at me like anchors. There were moments I wanted to walk away, buy a small cottage in the hills and vanish. Let someone else carry the burden. That's when I returned to my old home, not the resort, the house I grew up in. I stood outside, staring at the cracked walls, the half-burnt lantern still hanging from the porch. My mother had passed away peacefully. Months earlier, she'd seen the success, seen the change. She died proud, but her absence echoed through the courtyard like a hollow wind. I walked inside, sat on the same floor where I once ate dry bread and counted coins. And I asked myself the question that had haunted me since the beginning. Why me? Why does one farmer out of millions get this chance? And the answer came, not as a voice, but as a realization. Because I said yes to the unknown. Because I kept showing up. Because when others laughed, I learned. Because pain didn't kill my purpose, it forged it. Reinvigorated, I returned with sharper focus. We restructured the company, created a training academy for rural youth who wanted to become agripreneurs. We launched our own app, Rooted, which connects small farmers to eco-minded consumers across Pakistan. Within 2 years, I was on the cover of Forbes Pakistan, not as a tech guru, not as a politician, but as the farmer of the future. People started calling me a billionaire, and while that was technically true, between land assets, investments, and brand valuation, it never felt real. Because the real wealth wasn't numbers in a bank. It was seeing the daughter of our chicken caretaker become a veterinarian with a scholarship we funded. It was watching Ava speak at the UN about sustainable rural models, using our farm as a case study. It was watching children run barefoot across fields I once thought would never grow again. A few months ago, I received an invitation to return to my old school. The same school where I once sat in the back, wearing stitched uniforms, too ashamed to raise my hand. They wanted me to speak. I walked through those gates with tears in my eyes. The principal, a man who had once told me I was too dreamy, handed me the mic with a sheepish grin. This time I didn't talk about the land. I talked about belief. I told the students that your circumstances aren't chains, they're weights. And you can either let them break you, or you can build muscle with them. I ended with a sentence I had once written in a journal years ago. The soil may be dry, but the seed knows rain is coming. The room stood in silence. Then applause. Then hope. And I knew then that this wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. There's something about legacy you don't understand when you're young. You think it's about buildings, wealth, names in newspapers. But legacy, I've come to realize, is what people feel when they speak your name. It's what grows in the silence after your story is told. And most importantly, it's what lives on when you're not in the room. I never set out to build a legacy. In the beginning, all I wanted was to survive, to make it through the next harvest, to keep the lights on, to protect my mother's dignity. But life has a strange way of expanding your vision when you start walking toward something larger than yourself. Today, my world is vast, spread across regions, initiatives, and projects that I couldn't have even dreamed of a decade ago. But my soul, it's still rooted in that small field where my father once bent down to feel the soil and whispered, "This earth will never betray you if you honor it." That became my philosophy. After the second site in Hunza and third in Sindh gained traction, we launched the Green Ladder Initiative, a non-profit arm of our company dedicated to mentoring rural youth across South Asia. We taught not only sustainable farming, but leadership, branding, logistics, and digital marketing. We gave them tools, real ones. Within 2 years, we had over 300 graduates, most of them launching their own small-scale businesses, some even exporting specialty produce like saffron, organic rice, and dried mango to Europe and the Gulf. The pride I felt watching them speak in pitch competitions, confident, grounded, unapologetically from the soil, was unlike anything I'd known. But I didn't stop there. One of my deepest passions became reviving endangered farming traditions. I hired cultural historians, researchers, and old farmers from mountain villages to document nearly lost methods of soil healing, seed preservation, and traditional weather forecasting. We turned that knowledge into interactive learning centers, built into our resorts. Guests weren't just vacationing anymore. They were learning, contributing, evolving. Some of them left their careers in the city to volunteer with us full-time. Some became donors. Some, like the French chef who spent 2 weeks cooking with our village grandmothers, turned our model into inspiration for similar initiatives across Europe. Our name grew. We were invited to partner with the UNDP, the World Food Program, and several Ivy League institutions. I was flown to New York to receive the Global Earth Hero Award, a surreal experience where I stood in front of heads of state and whispered in my heart, "Look, Baba, we made it." But despite all the lights, cameras, and accolades, I made a decision that raised eyebrows everywhere. I refused to move to the city. They called me foolish. "Why stay in the village?" they asked. "Because this," I said, pointing to the trees, the cows, the people chatting on charpoys, "is the miracle. You just never looked at it long enough." I built a beautiful house near the first farm, not luxurious in a wasteful way, but elegant, built with natural wood, clay brick walls, solar panels, and a view that melted every sunset into poetry. And yes, I married Ava. Our wedding was quiet, held under a banyan tree beside a stream, surrounded by farmers, carpenters, her family, my village elders. She wore a soft pastel dress stitched by women from our vocational center. I wore a kurta my mother had kept wrapped in plastic for years, waiting for that day. We didn't invite media. We didn't need validation. That moment wasn't a headline. It was a homecoming. Together, we continued growing our empire, not just in wealth, but in impact. We launched a climate resilience fund, backed by our profits, to help rural communities hit by floods, droughts, and crop diseases. We designed floating gardens for areas that flooded annually, trained women in flood-prone regions to farm on bamboo rafts, and turned their produce into exportable pickles and snacks. We rebuilt schools using local materials and gave solar kits to homes that had never seen electric bulbs. I traveled to Africa, to Southeast Asia, even South America, spreading the model, listening, learning. I never acted like I had all the answers. I wasn't a savior. I was just a seed planter. And everywhere I went, I saw the same truth. The poor aren't weak. They're just waiting to be seen. One of the proudest days of my life came when we launched the Riaz Ava Fellowship, a program that sponsors 100 rural students annually to attend top agricultural universities worldwide. Fully funded. No strings. Just a promise that they return and uplift others. One of our first fellows, Fatima, the daughter of a wheat porter, just got accepted into Wageningen University in the Netherlands. She called me crying. "You believed in me before I did," she said. I couldn't reply for a moment. My throat choked up. Because the truth was, it wasn't just her. Every life we touched reminded me of the boy I used to be, the one kneeling in dirt, dreaming of sunlight. Now I often sit under the same neem tree where I first met Ava. Sometimes I sit alone, sometimes with her. Sometimes with school groups eager to learn. And when they ask me, "Sir, how did you become a billionaire?" I smile gently, not because of pride, but because I know how to answer now. I tell them, I said yes to struggle. I said yes to patience. I said yes to the girl with the broken-down car. But most of all, I said yes to my own value. The world will try to label you, a farmer, a nobody, just another poor kid, but your worth? That's not for them to decide. I pause. Your story doesn't start where you were born. It starts the day you refuse to quit. Today, I don't chase legacy anymore because legacy is blooming all around me. It's in the soil that feeds thousands. It's in the factories run by women we once trained in goat sheds. It's in the satellite image of lush green patches where only brown scars once stretched. And yes, it's in the laughter of my daughter, who runs barefoot across the same field her grandfather once cried over. We named her Zoya. It means life. Fade out. Music swells. On-screen text. From a cracked field in a forgotten village to a billion-dollar movement, Arman Riaz didn't just change his story. He gave others the courage to write theirs.